China is home to one of the oldest and most diverse cultural cuisines in the world. From the savory stews of the Sichuan region to the delicate flavors of the Cantonese region, every dish has its own individual personality. But culture and flavor aside, how does Chinese cooking stack up when it comes to your health? In this episode, we're going to be diving deep into some of the most traditional dishes that you'll find across China, and maybe even a closer look at some of the westernized versions of these foods that have kind of given Chinese cooking a bit of a bad rap. So grab your chopsticks because we're heading east. This is Wellness Without Borders, China Edition. Before you go any further, take a look at the description down below. I've included a free PDF recipe guide for you to make your own Chinese dishes at home. It's yours for the taking and yours for the making, so let me know which of these recipes you like the best down in the comments. And if you're new here, welcome. My name is Dr. Emile and I'm a naturopathic doctor on a mission to show the world that healthy doesn't have to be hard. Every cultural cuisine has its healthy dishes and its not so healthy dishes. But somehow we in the West have come up with this ideology that Chinese food by and large is unhealthy. The truth is, this has a lot to do with the influence that we have imposed on their traditional cooking. Go to any Chinese American restaurant and you will find dishes on the menu that you would never find at a traditional, authentic Chinese restaurant. So let's take a look at two of these dishes that you will definitely recognize: orange chicken and General Tso chicken. Those are probably two of the first things you think of when you think of Chinese cooking. But did you know that these are actually American inventions? It's chicken meat coated and deep fried and then covered in a thick corn syrupy sugary sauce. Not exactly the best representation of traditional Chinese cooking. This extremely high calorie inflammatory protein is the exact opposite of what you should be enjoying for a wholesome, healthy lunch or dinner. And as a result, we're gonna start off strong with orange chicken and General Tso chicken on the D tier today. But if you want a healthy protein option from your neighborhood Chinese restaurant, look no further than beef and broccoli. Interestingly, the traditional way to make beef and broccoli is to use traditional Chinese broccoli called gailan. But of course, when Chinese restaurants were popping up all across America in the 20th century, they couldn't exactly get their hands on Chinese broccoli or gailan. And so these folks had to use the ingredients that were simply made available to them. Thin slices of lean beef stir-fried in garlic, ginger, soy sauce, and of course, fibrous, healthy broccoli. This is a protein and fiber powerhouse, but if you're making it at home, be cautious of the amount of soy sauce that you put into your dish, as that can increase the sodium levels quite significantly. But if you've got your eye on the soy sauce, I'm gonna go ahead and put beef and broccoli in the S tier today. And while we're talking about healthy vegetables like gailan or Chinese broccoli, also take a closer look at bok choy, another amazing leafy green vegetable that is packed with micronutrients and fiber. Lightly steamed or sauteed bok choy packs a big nutritional punch. Mix it in with a little bit of garlic and ginger and you've got yourself a delicious and flavorful side vegetable dish to go with any protein. Bok choy, you too are gonna find yourself in the S tier today. Another dish that you might find on the menu of your local Chinese restaurant is kung pao chicken. But when made properly, this dish is actually derived from a pretty traditional Sichuan recipe. As is the case with so many traditional Chinese dishes, the magic is in the sauce. It's a little bit sweet, it's a little bit spicy, it's definitely aromatic. But as long as we're practicing a little bit of restraint when it comes to limiting the sugar, salt, and oil that we put into the sauce, I think that kung pao chicken can find itself all the way up in the A tier today. One thing to note about traditional Sichuan cooking is its notoriously famous mala seasoning. Mala is a term used to define the characteristics of this flavor profile, directly translating to numbing and spicy. And this is probably what you'll feel in your mouth after you eat a traditional Sichuan dish. And one of the most famous Sichuan dishes is mapo tofu. Now, if you're not into spicy food, keep on scrolling because this one it's not for you. As is the case with a lot of these traditional dishes, it all starts with building out the sauce, building out the base. Once it has that beautiful bright red color, you can add in your tofu and a little bit of cornstarch to give it some thickness. Many times ground pork is also used in these dishes, and so when you think of tofu, you probably think of a vegetarian dish, but that's not always the case. So be careful when you're ordering mapo tofu at the restaurant if you're vegetarian. But all things considered, as long as we're not too heavy-handed with the oil, I think mapo tofu is a pretty darn good dish, and we're gonna throw it all the way up in the A tier today. You'll start to notice throughout this episode that sauce can really make or break the dish, especially when it comes to Chinese cooking. And that's why we have to talk about things like Cantonese barbecue and braised pork ribs. Of course, when it comes to barbecue, we have to take a close look at the meat first. Is it a high quality cut? Is it laden with fat? Is it lean? These are all questions that we have to consider when we're trying to determine if this cut of meat is good for you or not so good for you. But regardless of the cut, if you drench your meat in high sugar barbecue sauce, a lot of that nutritional value is gonna go down the drain. Now, don't get me wrong, Cantonese barbecue and braised pork ribs are absolutely delicious, but we're gonna wanna be a little bit more sparing on these protein options just due to the amount of sugar that we're going to be consuming as well. And because of this, we're gonna put both of these proteins in the C tier today. Up next is Beijing's claim to fame. I'm talking about Peking duck. Now, in my opinion, this is one of the most impressive dishes across all of Chinese cooking. The amount of effort and meticulous attention to detail that goes into preparing the duck, it's so impressive. In many cases, to do Peking duck properly, it can take up to 2 days of preparation. And that's why many restaurants will actually require you to call in advance and place your order when you make your reservation. I'm not going to take you through the whole process of how this dish is prepared. There are tons of YouTube videos about that if you're interested. But when it comes to nutritional value, Peking duck walks a bit of a fine line. Duck by nature is already a bit of a fattier poultry meat, and part of the delicacy of Peking duck is the crispy skin that stays on every slice of meat. Typically, animal skin is loaded with cholesterol, and so you're definitely going to want to limit your consumption of the skin itself, even though that's kind of like the whole point. But duck meat in general is actually pretty good for you. It's a great protein source, and you're probably not going to have it every single day. And so I'm going to be realistic here. I'm going to go ahead and put Peking duck in the B tier today. Just be careful of how much duck skin you eat, please. Alrighty, that's enough about protein for now. Where are the carbs? Well, when I think about traditional Chinese cooking, I think about those beautiful hand-pulled noodles. I'm talking about lamian. Now, here's the thing with lamian. This is just the base of so many things that get built on top of the noodles. And that's kind of what dictates whether or not the dish is going to be healthy or unhealthy. Is it going to be part of a stir fry that's drenched in oil? Or is it going to be part of a wholesome, warm broth that's loaded with nutrients? Well, that's yet to be determined. So let's just take a look at the noodles themselves. And as is the case with any carbohydrate, I'm always cautious of portion control. And so just be careful of how much of this you put into a bowl when you're building out your dish. So with that said, I'm gonna go ahead and throw lamian hand-pulled noodles in the A tier today. Now, while we're on the topic of noodles, let's talk about a dish that really loses a lot of points based on the way that it is prepared, and that is lo mein. You've probably seen at some point in one of your favorite movies people walking down the streets of New York City eating juicy lo mein right out of the box. Well, sorry to break the news to you, but the reason that these noodles are so juicy and shiny is because they are drenched in oil. Sure, there might be little pieces of chicken or like a carrot or something in there to try to add a little bit of color, but by and large, fried noodles are usually not the best way to get your nutrition. Now, it might not be the absolute worst thing in the world, and so I'm gonna be a little generous today. Lo mein, you're gonna find yourself on the C tier today. Very similar things to say about my old friend, fried rice. Way to take a good thing and make it not so good by throwing it in a pan and mixing it with tons of oil. Very similar feelings about fried rice that I have about lo mein. It's kind of a pick your poison situation, and so I'm gonna go ahead and throw fried rice on the C tier right next to lo mein. Up next, we've got one of my favorite sections. I'm talking about the dumpling section. Now, there's so many different kinds of dumplings in the world of Chinese cooking, so let's kind of go through them and see what's gonna get some points and what's gonna lose some points. Starting off strong with one of my favorite, shrimp har gao. This is a dim sum favorite, and I'll be honest, I actually even have a hard time stopping myself when these things are coming to the table. But really, when you look at dim sum in general, especially one like shrimp har gao, it's actually really pretty good for you. On the inside of that really thin steamed rice paper dumpling skin, you've got a beautiful piece of high protein shrimp. It's light and airy with very little, if any, oil, just due to the fact that these dumplings are steamed. And the fact that it's made with rice paper instead of wheat flour makes it even that much lighter. And so because of that, I'm gonna put shrimp har gao in the dim sum category all the way up in the A tier today. Now, like I said, talk about taking a good thing and making it not so good. And this is where we have to talk about pan-fried dumplings. Whether you're using a rice paper skin or a wheat flour skin, it doesn't really matter. As soon as you throw it into a pan and drench it in oil, you have to imagine that it's gonna lose some nutrition points. Now, many of these dumplings can be stuffed with a protein or vegetable source, and so you might get some points there. But as soon as things turn a little crispy because of the frying process, I'm sorry, we're gonna have to drop you down a few notches. And so I'm gonna put pan-fried dumplings in the C tier today. Another category all on its own in Chinese cooking is soup and stew. One of the most famous Chinese soups is the traditional wonton soup. This is kind of a dumpling soup, for lack of a better word. It's usually a light chicken or vegetable broth with hand-folded wheat dumplings, each containing usually some kind of chicken or meat base. Oftentimes you'll find some veggies floating around in the soup too. This is a personal favorite for when I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. Nothing's more comforting like a good bowl of wonton soup. And so as long as we're being cautious on portion and sodium, I think that wonton soup can find itself pretty close to the top of the list. Let's give it A tier today. But perhaps the king of all stews when it comes to Chinese cooking is the Sichuan hot pot. If you've never been to a hot pot restaurant, my friend, you are missing out on a flavor explosion in your face. At a hot pot restaurant, you will find a burner right in the center of your table and servers coming out with tons of different vegetables, meats, sauces, all kinds of stuff for you to throw into the pot and essentially build your own adventure. Now, the flavors of the hot pot is usually determined by the region of China that you're in. For example, a hot pot in the north might taste quite different from a hot pot in the south. But the truth is, the combination of flavors when it comes to hot pot is kind of endless. As is the case with pretty much everything in Chinese cooking, be cautious of the amount of sodium you use from your soy sauce, the amount of sugar that you use from your hoisin sauce, and the amount of oil that you use when you're frying down your meat. But with all things considered, I think that we can go ahead and put hot pot in the B category today. Up next is what I think is one of the most healing foods in Chinese culture, and that is congee. Congee is kind of like a savory rice porridge that's typically enjoyed for breakfast, or honestly, when you're feeling a little bit under the weather. Congee has been around in Chinese cuisine for literally thousands of years, and so we pay homage to this amazing traditional dish by enjoying it to this day. Some people say that they have to get a little bit used to the texture, as it can be described as a little bit slimy. But to be honest, I think it's pretty darn good, and I think that you should give it a try if you haven't already. And if for no other reason, you should be eating congee for its health benefits. In Chinese medicine, congee is considered to be a nutritive food, as it's very easy to digest and gentle on the body. In many cases, this is the choice of food for small babies or even the elderly. And so because of all this, I'm gonna go ahead and throw congee in the S tier today. Up next, we have the Chinese fast food classic spring rolls. I don't think I have to unpack this one very much, my friends. These things are deep fried and as oily as you can get. Sorry, spring rolls. We're not gonna waste much time. We're gonna throw you right down in the D tier today. And ending off strong with a really interesting Chinese food that I did not want to miss in this video. In fact, I'd actually never even heard of it. I'm talking about century eggs. Have you ever had one of these? I was blown away when I saw a picture of this thing. Century eggs are preserved and fermented eggs that turn black underneath their shell after you peel it. Allegedly, it has a very pungent ammonia-like odor. They're not really selling it very well, I'm not gonna lie. A black egg? But every video I've seen of somebody trying this thing for the first time, they seem to love it. And the stats are pretty darn good too. Century eggs are high in protein and very easy to digest based on the fermentation process used to make them. If you're brave enough to try this exotic food, I think that you will be rewarded in high-level nutrition. And because of that, I'm gonna put century eggs right at the top of the list in the S tier. And just like that, my list is complete. Do you think that I left out any important ones? Let me know down in the comments. I will be sure to read every single one of them. Don't forget to grab that recipe guide down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Dr. Emile, and I will see you in the next video.